Good morning and welcome to episode 96 of Talking to Artists. Casual conversations with artists to learn a little bit more about their motivation, their background, their journey, tips for artists in terms of how you can kind of start your own art practice, and also just an opportunity for art lovers to get a bit of an understanding of the work that goes on behind the scenes to create these beautiful pieces that you're introducing into your home. So today I'm going just a couple quick things. For people who are in Toronto, the Riverdale Art Walk is this weekend, so that's the fourth show in a weekend in a row that I've got, and then it'll be pretty much over until September. So I hope you can come out. It's at Jimmy Simpson Park in Leslieville, 150 artists. It's going to be awesome. The weather's supposed to be gorgeous, so pretty excited about that. And I'm going to jump right in and actually introduce Rose. I'm looking forward to hearing all about her practice, which is so very different than mine. So I'm pretty excited about that. Hello. You know what? I forgot to put my earbuds in after I told you to do that, so hang on.
I don't have mine. My bag was lost/stolen, so.
Oh, that's horrible.
I know, yeah, I lost a hard drive with like so many photos.
Oh, you know, I've had that happen a couple times. I'm one of these people that my hard drive corrupts. I've had it stolen a couple of times. So I actually upload everything into OneDrive into the cloud now, and it's just saved my butt so many times.
But thankfully, you know, what I usually do, like, thank God, was I would upload the photos, go through them quick, do a quick edit, and pull out the ones I like and put them on my photo sharing site.
Oh, good. It's horrible though. I have a year where I hadn't, my OneDrive wasn't connecting and I was lazy and I didn't figure it out. So I actually have almost a year's worth of paintings that I don't have photographs of and I don't know where they are. And it's weird because every once in a while I'll have someone say, oh, I love this piece. Can you do a commission of, I don't know, by the lake or whatever? I'm like, I don't have the painting. I don't know what it looks like.
Yeah. So we're in simpatico about that.
Yes, unfortunately, not a good thing to have to bond over.
No. Nice to meet you, Kate, virtually.
Yes, great to meet you too. I was reading your website, and I'm just fascinated to hear about not only your history, but also kind of your journey of obviously being an expressive arts therapist and kind of incorporating that. But it sounds like you also, you know, like me, really believe in the healing value of nature, but you've kind of taken it tenfold. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about your journey and how you started, and we can chat from there.
Oh my goodness, how I started, that's like, I don't know, it has to be put into context. I started making art when I was a child, like very young. I had some really strong influences around me. My grandfather was an engineer for Dominion Engineering, but his real thing was to go on the weekends and do sketching.
Oh,
and
cool.
He was colorblind, and had been discouraged from being an artist when he was in school. He was from England. So anyways, he pursued his passion privately, and he did black and white sketches, and they were really beautiful and highly talented. And it was just an influence on me to have Granddad's sketches framed and up on the wall because everybody was so proud of them, and it just seemed like a natural thing to do.
Yeah, my grandmother was an artist as well, and I think when you're surrounded by art that you know the artist for, it makes it more approachable to actually consider having art a really important part of your life and potentially making that into a career.
Yeah, I consider myself really blessed because I mean my uncles are on my dad's side are musicians, professional musicians, and my aunt was an incredible embroidery textile artist, and my mom is an artist, and she taught home ec and sewing to people for a long time. So, and my dad, as I wrote in my website, my dad's a science teacher, which had a really strong influence on me. So I was just drawing from a really young age. And then when I was 16, my school board, which was a very large English language school board in Quebec, at the time it was like the biggest English language school board, they ran a logo contest, a logo design contest, and I won.
Oh, cool.
And they used that logo for the Lorneval School Board for like over 30 years after that. So I won a gift certificate as my prize to an art store, art supply store, and I can distinctly remember the gouache kit that I chose to this day. So that started when I was 16, and my dad said, "Oh, well, you earn money for it, so you're a professional."
That's true. That's true.
And in my mind, oh, okay, that's what I guess I'm doing. So, yeah, I also was lucky enough to study photography in high school with a really good instructor. So I left high school with some skills, and I used to be a darkroom technician. That's how I started my career way back in the day when people still used cameras in darkrooms.
Yeah, you know, my major actually was photography as well. And I have to say that I mean, I love taking the photos, but what I really loved was actually the darkroom work and just playing with it and how much creative flexibility you had. And once photography became digital, I just kind of lost interest in it. I didn't like the fact you didn't have to commit the same way, for me personally.
You know, I went through the same thing, Kate. I really lost interest when the whole digital revolution happened and it became difficult to access the whole darkroom tech. But I think when I went back to Emily Carr University, when I went back to university in 2013 as a mature student, I picked up the camera to start shooting my own reference photos for my paintings. And I bought a new camera and I fell in love with it. I have a Fuji TX20 or XT20. I can never remember which X or T comes before. And the purists will get really pissed hearing that.
Well, it's not the camera that makes the great art, it's the artist, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, the camera made a difference because it's a digital camera, but it looks and feels like an SLR.
Yeah.
So it started feeling more intuitive again, and I just fell back in love with photography.
So I need to do that because I actually got an SLR camera, well, digital SLR for Christmas. And honestly, it's still in the box. I'm so intimidated to even open it up. I'm like, I need to just force myself to do that.
Yeah, I don't know if it was like the different tech or it just felt different in my hands, because it felt similar, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's silly, but it's like there's a whole intuitive quality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it seemed to feed into that for me. And then also I was really lucky. I applied for a Canada Council research grant and I received it in 2016. So I was able to travel to Trinidad and just because it was a research grant, I didn't even have to produce anything. Hang on a sec. Stop. My dog is like, the minute I start doing anything with anyone else, he starts pawing at me. Go, lie down.
Yeah.
Lie down. Lie down. Sorry about that.
I'm gathering since you're part of the Trinidad and Tobago Society that is your heritage on your mom's side?
My dad's side. My dad's Trinidadian, full blown, and yeah, he came to Canada in the 60s, 50s and 60s to study at McGill University. Part of that like Windrush that happened in the UK as well,
Right,
from the
yeah.
West Indies. And he met my mom, who's purebred British Canadian, and yeah, Trinidad is part of my soul. He brought my grandma up to raise us, which is a very typically Caribbean thing to do. And I feel a really strong influence from that culture. And as I said, my aunt was a textile artist, and on my dad's side, and she was a very strong influence on me, both personally and artistically. As a child and as a young adult, we used to go to museums and galleries to look at textile art. And she used to have me actually when I was quite young reproduce images for her, like blow them up and stuff for her to do her embroidery. So we used to collaborate, and it was a really, I don't know, very strong influence on me, the culture. I've traveled there a lot, and I was lucky enough to do that research grant. And I picked my camera up, and it was part of like the research, but it was also part of falling back in love with what I was looking at through a camera lens.
Right. And so how do you think that your sort of Trinidadian heritage shows itself currently in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, they used to ask me that a lot when I was at Emily Carr. It was kind of weird because I was like, well, everybody's heritage shows, you know, either subconsciously or, I mean, consciously. It's like everybody has their heritage, right? I mean, a big part of my heritage is British, so
Right.
like, how does that show? I'm not sure, but
So
I
you
have been
basically
told that my
intuitively.
colors are really strong
Good.
and vibrant, and I think a part of that is the light, the quality of light in the Caribbean.
Hmm.
It's I mean, everywhere has a different quality of light. Like when I go back home to Quebec, especially in the autumn, like or in the summer, the quality of light when you're looking off into the distance is different than it is here in BC with the mountains and the ocean. There's different atmospheric things happening. It's like those amazing sunsets in Hawaii, right? Like there's like
Yeah.
it's just a different atmospheric conditions. And that's the same in Trinidad. It's only 12 degrees north of the equator. And the sunsets are spectacular, but there's a quality of light. And it differs between whether you're at the north part of the island or the south part of the island.
Wow.
So I feel that I did a residency at another artist, Edward Bowen's Sans Souci art residency in North Trinidad, and it was a real honor and a blessing to do that, and it really influenced my sense of colors, and I pulled a lot of botanical prints when I was there. So I think it just sort of started something that's continued over the last 6 years that's just infused my work. So yeah, there is an influence from that experience. And I did have a spiritual experience at a hummingbird sanctuary. Yeah. So that's been a strong influence in my work.
Yeah, I noticed on your website you've got a lot of hummingbirds that show up in your photography, but also in your paintings too.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had this thing with the natural world. And like when I was a child, my dad used to bring home animals and stuff. And like he was a golfer, so he'd bring home snapping turtle that he found when he was on the golf course because he'd bring it home and then he'd bring it to his class to instruct his students. So we saw like everything. We like if a bird hit a window in our little town, we would bring it to my dad and he would take care of it and fix it up. So I just from a young age, I just had a real fascination with bugs, and we used to dissect frogs when I was little, and just the whole, not the gory part, but just the fascinating part.
Understanding how it all connects, right?
Yeah, just the fascination of biology and cellular structures. And my favorite show when I was a kid was David Suzuki's Nature of Things. And, you know, my hero is Jane Goodall. So my interest in animals and plants in the natural world it springs from a real genuine source. And then when I was lucky enough to step into that hummingbird sanctuary and just be surrounded by literally thousands of hummingbirds, and there's 17 different species there. So there were all these different variations in color, and the air was humming and the flowers were flowering, and just like it was so intense. It was an intense spiritual experience for me, and it had definitely that sensibility has infused everything I've done. And so yeah, the hummingbirds show up, but you know, the hummingbird is the official bird of Vancouver City.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Anna's hummingbird. They winter over here. So they're around, right? They're just
they're pretty awesome. We have them at the cottage too, and you know when you have the opportunity, like we did during COVID, since we lived at the cottage, you really kind of sit in one place and you realize, first of all, I mean, everybody knows how active they are, but how much they sing and talk and how loud they are. Like I never had really kind of clued into that before.
Yeah, you know, once you know that, then you can't not notice when you're walking that, oh, you're like, oh, if I look really carefully, I might see a hummingbird.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome.
Yeah, well, the details of their biology is quite fascinating, and we're still learning more and more about them. So it's just like one of those areas of interest. Like I'm interested in fish as well. I had a whole like painting fish for years and about commercial fishing and losing the fish. Because, you know, this whole connection to the Caribbean, I saw the coral reef when I was a child. That was a long time ago, Kate. So the reef looks really different now.
Within your own lifespan, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it looks like noticeably different. I don't do the glass bottom boat ride anymore because I find it heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because everybody gets excited because you see just one ray go by. And when I was a kid, it was like not even comparable really anymore. So my interest is, I guess, just partly because I've seen a change in the natural world in my own lifetime.
Yeah.
That I guess for myself to ease that, what do they call that? Climate angst? Is that a term?
I think it is. Yeah, I think when you start to see, when you kind of sort of see that within your own lifetime, and you realize how quickly, you know, we're kind of destroying things around us, I think you can't help but have that angst, because I'm sure that part of it is connected to our deep-seated survival biology too, right?
Yeah, like maybe they're like that primal part of our brain is like hyper aware, vigilant about the changes, the environmental changes. I really noticed the other day the difference from when I first moved to BC, and I used to think, wow, the bird song in BC is almost like the Caribbean. There's so many birds here. It's not like that anymore.
Well, I guess with the wildfires and stuff, that's had a huge impact. Like I know my sister is on Vancouver Island. She's an artist as well. And for her, it's about the old growth trees. And, you know, even we went back to Vancouver, even the sanctuary there, which I had been to about 10 years before, and you could see the change. And it's like these trees are 800, 1,000 years old, yet in 10 years you see the change. And that's pretty scary.
Yeah, yeah. Things like tree rings and stuff, they're all changing because there's just so many stresses on them. One of the things that I'm sort of working with in my work, and it's part of the healing for myself to kind of process the angst and just to kind of raise awareness to heal the environment, is that there's like a policy, the government has a policy of spraying the unwanted tree species that they're not into, that aren't harvestable, so they can kind of wipe them out and you know, to prefer the species that they can harvest. But that's the boreal forest species. Those are the ones that like our native flora and fauna like depend on, right? Like alder, for example, that it's fast growing and it recovers quickly after a fire. It's got really deep roots. They're spraying to get rid of them because they're not wanted. But for me, I make art from them, so they're precious to me.
Well, even if you don't make art from them, I mean, the more you read about trees and the connectivity of trees and that whole kind of ecospan, you kind of realize that you can't just decide to pull out one thing and think you're not going to affect everything else too.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I mean, anybody who's kind of conservation or environmental aware knows there's lots of programs and, you know, people trying to save the boreal forest. And I am interested in all of those things because when I walk through my environment, I'm seeing, you know, I'm walking along the ocean here, right? And I'm walking through the forest when I'm lucky enough, because I live in the downtown east side. So I have to seek these things out. Otherwise, all I'm surrounded by are, you know, the lifts that they use to bring the cargo off of the ships.
Not complexity.
Like, I actually find it ironic because I am like steps away from the water, but I can't access the water.
Right.
Because it's right beside the port. So that's one aspect of my work. It's like people might think I live in a wonderland of forest, but I don't. A lot of these leaves are urban leaves.
Which also is super important to have that kind of nature within the city, right? To allow people to have a more healthy connectivity with nature.
Yeah, for me, it's very, very personal because I have a mobility challenge. I have a disability caused by severe endometriosis that was untreated for 30 years. So I kind of lost bits and pieces of my body. And so it makes it hard for me to walk sometimes. and I can't walk that far. But walking is really important because I want to keep it. Like I actually lost it after one of my surgeries. I had to relearn how to walk.
Wow.
So, so walking is like really important to me. And I walk even when it's uncomfortable, right? Even when it hurts, basically. And that's one reason why I have my little COVID poodle. Because he helped keep me, going outside and walking and active and doing stuff. And
Right.
interacting with the environment that way is important to me. It's part of my uh, personal mental health and well-being regimen.
And you mentioned, I think, I mean, and I'm kind of guessing because you had endometriosis, and it sounds like that was a long haul to kind of get through. That you used art kind of as your therapy, and is that what led you into becoming an expressive art therapist, so that you could?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because basically what I had was the equivalent of kidney stone every time I had my menstrual period from the age of 12. But what eventually happened was the damage caused was just all the time. And then years into the whole process, I finally got adequate gynecological surgery. And during that surgery, my surgeon took photos and asked me afterwards, when did you get the stent in your ureter? And I said, I don't have a stent in my ureter. What I had was a big lesion that was wrapped around my ureter that goes, between your kidney and your bladder. And so every time the hormones came down the chute, it closed my, and I did have the equivalent of a blocked, like a kidney stone, but it wasn't outside. It was out from a lesion. Let's just
Wow.
put it that way. So I had very high levels of pain that I was told were in my head for a long time. I was sent to psychiatric wards instead of being given treatment. There's a big, like that whole, yeah, woman of color in the medical system, and how you can be, stigmatized,
Marginal.
marginalized. Yeah, that whole thing happened to me personally. So along the way, I kind of started, I did have mental health challenges because I was being told that I was doing it to myself, right? Like I wasn't really in pain and that I was causing myself to suffer.
Right.
But really I had a lesion that was blocking off my ureter from a really young age. So finding a way to cope and to stay sane and to continue believing in myself and what I was experiencing, like in my body and around my body, what else was I going to do? There's nothing else on the planet that's going to help you get through that but art.
Right.
I don't care what anyone says. I mean, they could have given me a million drugs. That was not going to help me cope with the chronic component and the acute component of what I was dealing with for 30 years. So I found art, and I'm glad that I'd started when I was young and that I had some skills, because I used to just lose time. Lots of artists lose time when they're making their art, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like I can totally see how it works very differently than drugs in the sense that you get into that zone and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, 4 hours have passed. And you're not really
Everyone's done
conscious of
that,
your
right?
body.
Like every artist I know has gone like, oh my God, I didn't even eat all day
Yeah.
because they, they were so in that zone, and you don't want to disturb the zone when the zone is happening.
I don't even think you're conscious of it either. Like I find when I sort of get to the point where I'm kind of done, all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I'm starving. My back is killing me. And all these things that weren't bothering me
That
before.
that's the word. We're not conscious of our physical being when we're in that zone. So um it worked. It helped me find a place of refuge from having to be in my body.
Right.
It
And so then I guess you sort of felt that that was so powerful for you that you wanted to share that with other people and help them heal in a healthy way as well.
Yeah, and I already did have a background in drama. I had studied drama when I was younger. I'd studied music. I played the trombone in the high school band, and our high school band was like high level. Like they won in Holland for like the international high school bands, and we had a stage band. And so music and drama and movement, I studied ballet, and I danced. So all of those combined, that's expressive arts therapy. And so I had the right background. And I'd also done a lot of therapy myself. So not necessarily art therapy, but I'd explored, what a therapeutic relationship is on the other side. And let's face it, I've been in the psych ward. Like, I've been on every psych ward in Vancouver because that's where the medical system was sending me instead of giving me the help that I needed. So
scary.
It was scary, but on the other side, when I was working at Riverview, the now defunct psychiatric hospital in Vancouver, I found it very rewarding, and I had no fear to go on the locked wards, whereas a lot of other students didn't want to do that practicum because it seemed scary, but to me, no, it wasn't scary. I could feel from the patient's perspective, quite easily and empathize on that level, but also come at it with the skills as the expressive arts therapist at that point. So, Kate, really, it was about wanting to be able to share it with other people.
Mm-hmm.
When I see people suffering, there's a component of I've watched, as I'm getting older, my peers who had no sympathy for me when I was younger because nothing was wrong with them. But now some of them are, encountering age-related challenges or even disability.
Right.
I can see that there's, people need help to transition from the concept of I am the healthy me, the not disabled me, to the, now I need to use a cane sometimes, or, now my eyesight's not so great, or I'm hearing impaired, or there's this transitional period for folks that is very difficult. And I'd love to be able to help people with that because, it's a specific thing, but it's poignant and touching when I see it happening around me,
Well, and it's a hard thing too because it's natural. So intellectually, that as you get older, your body breaks down and you can't recover as quickly. But it's also giving up on, I think, your sense of self of what you were and having to change that, which is, you want to grab onto and hold on to where you were when you were young and healthy and strong,
Yeah, exactly. Well, all of us do, so do I. Like, that's one of the reasons why I pursue this particular medium. I could just go to the art store and buy art supplies like everybody else. But, the whole seeking out my pigments and my matrix and everything from nature and from recycled materials and from what I'm encountering in my environment. Like, I'm using lichen and I'm using bark, and what I'm finding when I'm walking, the train tracks are right here, and when there's bits of rusty stuff, I pick that up too because that's part of my process.
So talk to me specifically about how do you integrate that? Like, if you have rusty pieces and lichen, do you just kind of incorporate it in, or do you actually use those to create a chemistry that you then paint with, or what's your process?
Yeah, well, in the case of lichen, it's an ancient source of dye. That's one of the things that we used before synthetic dyes. They have traces of it in some of the Viking archaeological digs. Excuse me, certain mushrooms and lichens will give you dye. You can either boil them or you can do an ammonia fermentation process. They call it ammonia fermentation, but it's basically like just sticking it in ammonia and water for a couple months, shaking it around, making sure it has oxygen and heat to the right levels. And then it transforms some of them into these beautiful orchid-based purple dyes, and some of them are mauves and blues and like these lovely, beautiful natural colors derived from, the things that are in our environment. I sustainably harvest those lichen because lichen are very slow growing. They're important for the balance in the ecosystem. So you only harvest them when there's windfall, essentially. And of course, in Vancouver, there's a lot of
And so do you get the same color from the lichen if you do the ammonia process versus boiling it, or is it a different
No,
color?
no. And different lichen will give you different results. Some of them, you put them in ammonia, they give you nothing more than brown. But some of them, you the same one you put in, you boil water at the right temperature, and it gives you gorgeous golds or whatever. The actual, like the original tartan plaids that were woven by my Scottish ancestors were dyed with lichens and mushrooms and those types of things, bark, and that's where you get the colors from the original tweeds.
Right. Oh, that's so cool. Well, I
Yeah.
only have a little bit of experience in that. When my wedding dress was made of Thai silk, so it was very, very yellowy, like a warm yellowy cream, and I couldn't get a veil to match, so I ended up dyeing it with a combination of marigolds and tea bags to get the right color.
Good for you! Yay! And it also makes it feel more personal, doesn't it?
It does. It was very cool, yeah, and it was really neat to kind of experiment and try and figure out that combination and how long do you have to leave it for, and yeah, it creates just some beautiful colors.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to do for, for people, if I could, is capture some of those events from their floral arrangements, because you can't necessarily capture every plant. Not all of them have the right kind of tannin balance, but a lot of them do. And so you could take your bouquet that you'd used and then print that either on a paper piece or on a fabric and turn that into a keepsake that you can keep forever. And it's the actual plant material that you use. Like the pigment came from your actual bouquet. I like the idea also. I've done this for somebody that was moving, and they were leaving their garden that they'd put love and attention into for so many years. So
Right.
I could print a piece from their favorite pieces in their garden and then take it with them when they move.
That's really cool. And so the textiles on your website, I'm assuming then they're all one of a kind because you're kind of creating each one of these individually with these lichens and stones and moss and stuff like that. And so you were saying you also incorporate kind of leaves from the city. Are those get monoprinted on, or what do you do with those?
Yeah, well, when I pick up the rusty bits, I stick them in some water and some vinegar, and I let them cook and turn into basically iron acetate, because it's vinegar and iron, and it oxidizes, so I get this rusty water. Essentially, I have nice rusty water. I do that with copper bits. I do that with iron bits, and then I have these like chemistry. I buy aluminum water. I buy aluminum so that I can put that in water. I treat my fabric or my paper with these different metals. The different metals are going to bring out different levels of color from my plant material. Then I lay it down on this pre-treated matrix. Excuse me. I'm sorry, the train is back there. I hope you guys aren't hearing like the big train noise.
No, we're good. I've got construction out my window.
1000 Parker Street is a great place to have a studio, but there's a train right there. So, anyway. Okay, so then I take my leaves and or flowers, mostly leaves. Some flowers print. I'm doing more experimentation with flowers lately. I lay them onto my matrix. I roll it really, really tightly. A lot of people use a metal pipe. I like to use a piece of plumber's tubing that's like that you use for your hot water, and then I put a stick in it to make it stiff while I'm rolling it up. And then when I could take the stick out, I could coil it, fit it into my pot, and that the hose can stand the heat. Because then what I do is I steam it for an hour and a half. So I've rolled it really, really tightly, so there's really tight contact between my leaf and my fabric or my paper. It steams. It gets really, really hot. Take that out, unroll it, and you have a botanical print, like this one right here. This one is just pure botanical print, no component at all. The one above, I've painted. The one with the buck, I then went in and I painted to enhance some of the leaves, and then, of course, to paint the buck.
Yeah.
But most of it began as the botanical print with 3 different colors of natural dye. So I used a blanket with dye. I used cochineal dye, which is the magenta. I used logwood, which is the bluish, and I used Brazil wood, which is the orange. So at the top there's the orange at the top. And then this one at the bottom, that one's just recently printed. So that's all that is natural pigment from the leaves on a piece of wool. That's a repurposed piece of wool. So once I've taken it out of the steamer, that's what I got. Was the one. And I discovered this woman in, this lovely lady, Wendy Feldberg in Ottawa, and she makes plant-based inks by hand from her garden material.
Yeah.
See buckthorn and irises and hibiscus and God all knows what. Anyway, so I have these lovely natural dye pigments that I'm using. So all of this one is going to be all plant pigment. This is for commission, and my client wants me to paint a certain animal into it.
And is it colourfast, or does it fade in the sun, or do you have to be careful with it? Or
well, you know, you don't want to hang any of your art in the sun. Nobody, really, you don't want to hang any of your art that you care about in the full direct sunlight.
Yeah.
My pieces, I have done what you call mordant my fabric or my paper. So to mordant is to treat them with these metal salts that I referred to, the iron acetate or copper acetate. And when you've done that correctly, it's light fast and it's wash fast. And as long as when you're washing them, you use a pH neutral soap, like a baby soap.
Right.
You can use Dawn because Dawn is pH neutral. That's what I use. So when you're talking about my fabric pieces, like this is on silk that's also repurposed. And this is at least 5 years old, and it's been hanging. And It hasn't lost any of its color.
That's really cool.
And if you can see it, all the natural color of the leaves is transferred onto this fabric really beautifully.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
So, yeah, if you mordant correctly, you will not lose the natural dye. It may fade over time, just like indigo, like your jeans. Right. If you're really wearing them. I've got a pair of jeans that I printed like 6 years ago, and I can see like my photo when I first shot it, colors were really bright. The colors are not as bright, but the jeans are great. They still have the print, and I still enjoy wearing them. So
it's interesting. My father is Estonian, and one of the things we used to do at Easter is we used to get like basically dye our Easter eggs, but with natural onion skins and natural products, and then you boil them, and your colors there just totally reminded me of that. And it's been interesting because we used to be able to pick up, pieces of wool and stuff like that and create some just gorgeous patterns on our Easter eggs, right? And over the last, I would say 10 years, it's becoming more and more difficult. Like the onion skins obviously still work, but a lot of the other stuff is so color fast that it's kind of nice to be able to get back to being able to kind of get those natural dyes out of natural products. And you've inspired me to do more cool Easter egg stuff this year.
Yeah, well, the Easter eggs are part of the whole inspiration for this medium. India Flint in Australia is pretty well known for having kind of popularized this modern movement of eco-printing. And she was influenced by her cultural background of dyeing the eggs with her grandmother.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool.
Yeah, that's kind of like a full circle right there. But yeah, for me, a lot of it came from exploring the medicinal plants that I was trying to I was into medicinal plants and herbal healing because I had this pain that I needed to deal with, and nobody was really, allopathic medicine wasn't coming through for me. So, and my background, my Trinidadian background was that my grandmother used to just go in the kitchen and she'd boil up some stuff and cure you with it, right? Whatever sickness you had, grandma would go and make some kind of bush tea, bush medicine, and that would be the story. So this whole thing for me started with exploring the herbal healing of plants, the medicine qualities, and then when I discovered their diet component, my artist mind just went, oh my goodness, I could do both at the same time. So
Yeah, it kind of seems like all these things that look like they're very desperate kind of came together for you in one kind of cohesive body of work.
Yeah, and you know the process is long and laborious. It takes me days and days and days to like collect the plants and treat the fabric and find the fabric and source the metals and you know all of that stuff. So I always have like something cooking and on the go, and my freezer is full of plants instead of ice cream. I get in trouble for that, and you know but it's a labor of love. It's a labor of pure love of craft because I really enjoy the craft, the hands in their chemistry of just kind of almost like the dark room, you know,
Yeah,
like the dark room was like a nice chemistry kind of nerd place to hang out.
totally, totally.
That's kind of what I'm doing, but on a whole other level with incorporating the plants that are living in and around me and the animals that I'm encountering if I'm lucky enough when I'm kind of walking through those plants. Because even in the city, I mean, we've got a skunk that lives right across the street in the downtown east side. I don't know where, but that skunk has somewhere to hang out at night. I don't.
Or is you going to track down the skunk now and figure out what you can do with them?
But I might use the photo that I took because that's part of the process. Is the photos that I'm taking when I'm doing these derives, these walks, get incorporated then back into the pieces that like these leaves are going to speak to me, you know. Yeah. They speak a monoprint kind of tells you where to go and it directs the development, and I like that part of the unknown of the medium that I'm doing. It's
right.
it's
Yeah, no.
I'm changed.
Well, I just think there's something fascinating. There's a couple people on texting too about, you know, that whole concept of using kind of organic dyes, and a lot of that does, I think, go back to a lot of our heritage, right? Where within, you know, with every culture, they would have been creating their dyes based on what was around them and what was available.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's kind of like getting back in touch with the ancestors in a sense, and also, of course, the slow fashion movement. I mean, I haven't really bought new clothes myself. Like most of my life, I started off thrifting in the '80s when it wasn't cool, just because you know, I was small, nothing fit me, and I wanted something different anyways, right? Yeah. So recycling, upcycling, thrifting, all of those terms, that's just been a way of life for me. But then, like, knowing that the fashion industry is one of the most toxic, polluting industries on the planet, it's all well and good. I want to fight, you know, the oil industry, and I want to keep them from cutting down the, you know, Fairy Creek. But my goodness, as a female human being, I need to be conscious about the amount of clothing that I am buying and consuming and throwing out, because it is hugely polluting. The dyeing and the treating of the fabrics is hugely polluting, and we don't need to do that. So for me, I'm making a personal statement about what I wish the world could sort of, you know, step back to in a sense. Like even I know that there's people lobbying to change legislation about giving us back the right to repair the technology that we're buying.
Which is ridiculous that we even have to fight for that right, when we're talking about recycling and all that kind of crap. And yet, you know, like you're super happy if your dryer lasts for 5 years. I'm like, that's crazy. The dryers used to last for 40 years.
How many of us have a drawer full of defunct phones, you know? Like,
yeah.
We should be able to go in there and open it up and fix it, get it repaired like we used to do.
Yeah, so like in the olden days. Well, especially because I don't really need the most recent phone. I just want something that works, that's consistent and reliable, and I don't really care what it looks like. Or
yeah, and I think there's a movement now for people to reject that whole I need to have the latest thing concept, because we all know now how polluting and wasteful it is. Yeah. So yeah, you don't need the latest, but hey, come to me. You can get an original, one of a kind. I do make wearables. I have limited edition, affordable, you know, wearables that I make available sometimes, because when I'm thrifting, I find pieces that I want to print. I can't help myself. It's not just, you know, untouched fabric that I want to print. I print pieces of clothing. I print tablecloths. I print, you know, whatever. Somebody brought me a bunch of work rags that the shop didn't need anymore. And I was like, I can turn these into beautiful napkins. I just need to print them and put a little rickrack around the edges, and they're going to be amazing. This is a recycling concept. We don't need to throw these out.
Right.
We can use these and love these and adorn ourselves and be unique and individual and not be contributing to the fast fashion debacle that's going on.
Well, you're right. And I think part of it too is closing that cycle in terms of figuring out where to send that stuff. Like, you know, I sometimes kind of joke. I said, oh, I'm such a hoarder. And I'm like, well, I'm not really a hoarder, but I'm not willing to throw stuff out. I'm not willing to put it into the dump. You know, there's definitely stuff I'll take to, you know, donate or whatever when it's stuff that either doesn't fit me or is, you know, I got too fat for, and I will never be that size again. But sometimes it's hard to know how to responsibly get that stuff out of your world so it can go into somebody else's world.
Yeah, it is. But you know what? Now that we're past COVID and we can gather again safely, you know, taking precautions, we can go back to having those parties we used to have where, you know, we'd say, oh, okay, I'm going to, you know, bring the clothes that you don't want anymore, and we'll have a party, and, you know, 8 or 10 of us will hang out, enjoy some music and some company, and we'll go through the clothes. And we used to do that, and it was fabulous because the clothes, as you say, you've grown out of them, or you don't need them anymore, or your old maternity clothes or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the other girlfriends in the community would go, oh, okay, I could use that, or my niece needs this, or whatever, and it would get redistributed instead of thrown out. And maybe we need to go back to doing those kind of things. And I mean, they were fun and sociable too.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. Yeah.
I remember a couple good ones myself.
I'm always too tall. Like I always get depressed. It's like, oh, everything is too small and too short for me. But anyway, that's just my thing.
Try again. Yeah, I'm sure there's another tall person.
I'm sure there is, yes. Well, my sister and I go back and forth with some of that stuff. But I also, I just find, you know, a lot of the clothes I have are like 10, 12, 15 years old, and I like them. Like they're comfortable. Yeah. They've got memories and they've got connection, and, you know, well, it's kind of, I don't necessarily feel
true. You know, most of us have those pieces in our closet that we have a connection. We have a connection to the items that we surround ourselves with. And for me, that's like, it's not just about a painting on the wall, because I do make paintings on the walls, but I make those kind of items as well. You know, like I have a cushion that I made for a family member that they cherish. But it's a functional item, but I made it, you know, when I was visiting, and I did, it was a sample on silk, and then I just turned it into a cushion, and it was like, those kind of items carry meaning for us in our life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And why not? You know, we have to find meaning somewhere.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. So we are kind of almost out of time. So I just wanted to also just briefly talk about, because you're part of this awesome collaboration with 6 other artists. So I'm really interested now, after seeing your process and how you work, how you're going to incorporate your process into a piece that's kind of traveled through potentially 6 other artists.
Yeah, it's my process is different, but I have a lot of well, I use what we call dye blankets. So when I finished my process, when I finished this guy down below, I had a big piece of fabric that was like a mirror image of it that I used to transfer either the dye or the chemistry. So sometimes what I use are shop towels or paper towels on purpose, so that I can then reuse them in another piece of artwork. So I have a lot of them, and I do collages. I don't know if I have one here. Yeah, this piece is a collage. So the whole background is my dye blankets that I used that were shop towels originally.
Oh, wow.
And so it was printed, and it kept the imprint of the dye, the cochineal dye and the logwood dye and the leaves. So what I usually do with the pieces that come through is I try to incorporate the collage elements, or one of the last ones, I just went in and painted a dragonfly into it because it was so delicate and sort of sensitive piece that I just wanted to keep it soft and delicate as well, my contribution. I'm finding that the pieces that come through, I'm not having as much trouble as the other artists in responding to them, but I think it's my expressive arts therapy training, because we are taught and trained to have what we call a creative response.
Right.
To our client's creative process, to whatever's happening for the other person, we have a response, a creative response. And so I'm finding that these pieces are bringing that out in me, and I'm enjoying it. I'm having like an instant creative response to like the visuals, and then I'm reading their little visa passport that's coming with each one, and the intentions that each artist had for it, and then that's influencing my creative response, almost like poetry.
Right.
Some of what they write is like poetry. I mean, I'm like in tears, like, oh my God, I'm so touched. So then I just put the piece up, I look at it for a couple of days, and I'm luckier than some of the artists. I have a studio. I have my little space. I have my stuff. Like I don't have to look for inspiration and stuff. I've got stuff. So it's a little bit easier, I think, for me to just go, oh, okay, this suits this guy, or this medium is perfect for this, or oh, I've got this collage or color or whatever. It's kind of like a little house of play for me, like Pee-wee's
Right.
Playhouse.
You're really starting with the elements as opposed to having to create everything from totally fresh. Yeah.
I already have all of my components. I have my leaves in my freezer. I've got, everything kind of already stewing and waiting for it to drop in. And then I have this lovely little mystery surprise, boom, drop in, and I'm kind of primed, and having that creative creative response training, I feel also helps me kind of understand those boundaries, because that's very important when you're an art therapist, is to be working with someone with their creativity, but understand the boundaries and be able to step back where you need to.
Yeah.
And just allow it to happen. So I think that that's helping me personally, because I'm just super enjoying this process. I'm just like delighted, and I'm finding it mysterious and challenging. I love the challenge of incorporating my thing into the other artists' visions coming together. I'm just finding it, I don't know, very stimulating. I find it highly creatively stimulating. That's how I'm describing it. I'm enjoying their personalities revealing themselves even more through the art.
Well, I am super looking forward to seeing some of the end results after it goes through all 7 of you. I think it's just going to be fascinating.
I am too.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to let you go so I have time to actually be able to kind of upload this, but I want to thank you so much for your interview and your candor. And there's a whole bunch of notes. Look, these are all my notes that we didn't actually get to, but I've loved talking to you about, especially about your process, and the eco-printing was just fascinating. So thank you so much.
I can't thank you enough, Kate, for taking an interest in our project and for giving me this opportunity to talk about my work. As most of us know, when we have a passion, that's all we want to talk about.
Well, cool. That's great. That's why I do these sessions.
Thanks so much, Kate. You have a fabulous day.
Thank you. You too. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you guys next week. Just a reminder, next week I'm going to be talking to Cheryl. She's also part of this collaboration, but because she's in Australia, it's going to be at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So don't forget, and hope we'll see you. Talk to you later. Bye.